Went down in week 11 of this college football season. So there's a new elite program in college football, the Ole Miss Rebels. They dominated Georgia yesterday. What a difference a year can make nowadays in college football because they got dominated by Georgia just last season. Ole Miss has the best quarterback, the best front seven, and the best wide receiver room and tight end room in the SEC this season, and they might be the best team in the SEC this season. They should not have lost to Kentucky. That was a fluke, and they had the LSU game, but Lane Kiffin blew that when he made a terrible coaching decision. So they really should be 10-0 at this point. But Ole Miss beat Georgia at their own game yesterday by dominating them at the line of scrimmage on both sides. So Georgia is not a top five team this season. I don't think they're not as good as they've been these past three seasons, but they're still a top 10 team, and this is the biggest win for Ole Miss since they beat Alabama in 2015. But Georgia is still good because, they did beat Texas on the road by 15 points, who is a really good team. But for Georgia, Tennessee next week becomes a must win for them, or they will for sure miss out on the college football playoff. And Ole Miss didn't even have Trey Harris, the best receiver in the country, yesterday, except for the first possession of the game yesterday, where Jackson Dart throws an interception, and then Georgia takes it in the end zone, having to only move the ball 21 yards. Ole Miss dominated the game. Georgia couldn't hardly do anything offensively. They were held to 59 rushing yards on 33 runs. So they averaged 1.8 yards per run yesterday. And Carson Turnover Beck played terrible. He had only 186 yards passing and only averaged 6 yards to throw. And he had zero touchdown passes. But he did improve on his interceptions. He only threw one interception yesterday, and that was his 12th interception of the season. And he's turned the ball over 14 times now this season. But he threw an interception at the worst time of the game for Georgia, and it had me jumping up and down for joy when he did it. I had been waiting for him to do it all day, and he did it at the best time. And he fumbled also not long after he threw that interception. And Georgia's offensive line is not as good as it was supposed to be this season, but it's not all the offensive line's fault. Now, Carson Beck was sacked 5 times yesterday, but it helps the offensive line if you have a quarterback, unlike Turnover Beck, that isn't just a statue that throws the football, but can also run around a little bit. And Georgia hasn't had a quarterback that could run, except for Stetson Bennett, since I've been watching football that I can remember. And they only got him by accident because Kirby Smart didn't want him. He sent him off to junior college, but he ended up coming back. And Kirby Smart, for him, if Georgia keeps playing like this, he might need to join Lane Kiffin's uh, team because Nick Saban no longer is around, and he had the program for football coaches that were on the wrong track to help them get good. But now that he's retired, Lane Kiffin might have to help out Kirby Smart, especially if Carson Beck returns next season, which is becoming more and more likely that dud is going to stay in college because the NFL teams, if they watch film of him this season, they're not going to want him anywhere near their team. And Georgia losing Brock Bowers, it sure turned out to have a big effect on their team. And Georgia thought that they were the new best program in college football, uh, and that Alabama no longer was. And it might be true that Alabama is no longer the best program in college football, but it might not be Georgia that has replaced them. It might be a team from Oxford, Mississippi that has. And Alabama destroyed LSU yesterday, 42 to 13. So that stuff about how it's impossible to win at night at LSU turns out isn't true. Alabama also showed that it's possible to blow out LSU there at night. Alabama destroyed LSU with the quarterback run last night. Jalen Milrow had 185 yards at rushing and four rushing touchdowns on only 12 carries. He averaged 15.4 yards per run. And it was nice to see Alabama do this to LSU after watching my favorite team, Ole Miss, blow the game at LSU earlier this season. Because Alabama is also one of my favorite teams. LSU is out of the college football playoff. They can't stop the quarterback run because not just Jalen Milrow has done it to them this season. In their game before Alabama, Marcel Reed, the quarterback for Texas A&M, they couldn't stop his runs. And then early this season against South Carolina, Lenore Sellers, their quarterback, who's a good runner, they couldn't stop him. And Alabama, I said before the season began, might have the best offensive line in the country, and it looks like they might have the highest ceiling of all of the offensive lines this season. They just haven't always played like it. Like the Tennessee game, their offensive line played terrible. I thought, but yesterday their offensive line looked like the best in the country. And their five starters are all going to be NFL players. Caden Proctor, Jaden Roberts, Tyler Booker, Parker Brailsford, and Elijah Pratchett, or whatever his name is. But Alabama is very likely now going to go to the college football playoff, and Ole Miss, because they'll both be big favorites in the rest of their games. And one of them might even be able to go to the SEC championship. Both going isn't very likely. The winner of the Texas A&M game is very likely going to go to the SEC championship. And looks like Malachi Moore might not be too bad of a head coach after all. And Miami lost their first game of the season, getting upset by Georgia Tech, who was a four-loss team. And it seemed like it was about time for Miami to lose a game because they've had several really close wins. And early on this season, I could start to tell that Miami isn't an actual national title contending team. Now, they might still be the best team in the ACC, and with their last two games being against Wake Forest and Syracuse, they're very likely going to win the rest of their games and go to the ACC championship. But they're not going to win the national title. There's no chance of that. And Georgia Tech ran for 271 yards on them. Miami's defense just isn't very good, and their offense didn't even do very well yesterday. But Cam Ward is still a really good quarterback who's going to go to the NFL, even though this probably ruined his Heisman chances. And Restrepo is a really good receiver that's also going to play in the NFL. And Billy Napier showed Florida how much he appreciates them being dumb enough to give him another season as their head coach by getting blown out by Texas 49 to 17. Now I get that Texas is a really good team, but that sure wasn't much of a way to show a thank you for them being that dumb. He's a garbage head coach, and Florida made a big mistake by keeping him. And Florida, it seems like things couldn't get any worse for them right now because he's going to be back next year as their head coach, and they've been a garbage football program for the past 4 seasons, and they also have so many injuries. But it is going to get even worse because next week they're playing the ones from Oxford, Mississippi, that are going to come over there and destroy them. But Georgia also struggled with the quarterback run yesterday. Jackson Dart had 50 yards at rushing himself on only 8 carries. But Ole Miss might actually be a real national title contender this season. Lane Kiffin got the biggest win of his coaching career. But that will be it with this video. Please subscribe and thanks for watching. And I'll be back soon. Hotty toddy.